Welcome to the Investigation Game podcast, brought to you by Workman Forensics.
Welcome to the Investigation Game podcast. I'm Leah Wheatholter, CEO of Workman Forensics in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Joining me today is Matthew Spaier. Matt is the owner of Satellite Investigations in New York City. He's the first Vice President of the ALDONYS and serves as the Region 2 Director of NCISS. Matt is the creator of investigatorstoolbox.com, an online networking, learning, and resource community for investigative professionals. He also hosts PI Perspectives, a weekly webcast geared towards investigations. Thank you for joining me today, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Lee. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, I think we have some really fun topics. Today, we're going to be talking about PI investigations related to plaintiff personal injury and accident site photography. These are two things I have never worked on, so I am very eager to learn more. But before we jump into that, I really just like to know, did you always plan to be an investigator?
So here's the thing. I was a terrible student in high school. I lived in auto shop. I had an old Mustang, like a 73 Mach 1 Mustang, and I spent all my time there, and my grades were terrible. The only thing I really liked doing was social studies. And when it got to the point of, am I going to college, my guidance counselor actually asked me if I was going to college. I'm like, yeah, no thanks to you, dude. So to me, it was like criminal justice just made sense because I loved history. And I ended up going to John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York City.
Okay. Very cool. So after you went there, what were your next steps?
Yeah, so I did some internships while I was there for the Department of Investigation, which is kind of like the internal affairs for everything other than NYPD in New York. And I had a job lined up with them. They really liked the work that I did. I worked in their special investigation unit, and I learned how to do wiretaps and set up video cameras. I worked in their corrections division where I was one of the people that did the data entry for the gang database that they started. So it was very new back in the early 90s. They started actually tracking the gangs. But the city went on a hiring freeze, and they had to rescind their job offer. And I basically took the first job I could get, which was for $6 an hour as a reference checker for a retail investigation company. I held that position for 2 hours before I got promoted to a field investigator and ended up becoming director of operations for that company. I worked there for about 3 years.
So you mentioned that you learned how to do wiretaps and set up cameras and things like that. And when I think back to my internship with the FBI, I got to do really cool stuff. But man, I wish I had paid attention to the tech. Like they had a tech agent who did all kinds of awesome things. And I just didn't think that I would need to know those things. That is like my one regret, is that I didn't learn more about the gadgets.
So yeah, I was doing that stuff in like 1993 or 92, 94. And the technology was definitely different. Back then it was a lot more bulkier, but it was definitely very cool.
Yeah, so cool. Okay, so when did you start your company?
2005. So what happened was I was working for a personal injury attorney beforehand. I'd worked for him for about 4 years, and he wanted me to become an attorney. And I really considered it till I saw how much it was going to cost to go to law school. And I took the path of least resistance and wrote a business plan to take a loan to start a business. In fact, the only reason I got that loan is because I had money from my wedding in my bank account. So they wanted to see all my assets. They gave me a $35,000 loan, and I paid for my wedding literally 2 weeks later. So,
oh, wow.
Best shell game ever.
Really, yeah, gosh.
Really cool. But yeah, so 2005, I started off on my own. I hired my first employee in 2007. And right now I have like 5 employees working for me, and like another 4 or 5 that are per diem.
Okay, that's cool. So like contract?
Yeah, it's 1099 stuff, and then sometimes you need to pull on relationships and things like that. So it's not necessarily 1099 because I'm picking up whatever I'm paying them. So one of those deals. It's all on who you know sometimes, right?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this a lot lately. What is your kind of favorite size team to work with after all these years? Do you have a favorite?
Yeah. I mean, my model, I always had a plan. Like, I don't want to be that company that has 70 employees or anything like that. I think that's just, more money, more problems. I've always sold myself as being a boutique firm and that you're getting hands-on, but I'm also finding myself that I don't want to be as hands-on anymore and I want to step back. So I think the right size in our industry is probably somewhere around 4 or 5. And they got to be really good people too, that you can count on to do it. They essentially have to be a carbon copy of you, but not having to worry about, payroll or anything like that.
Yeah, I have recently decided that my kind of dream team size is 6, and like not new high, like entry level. So I would agree with that. Smaller team.
Yeah, it just gives you better control over quality. And I find that I replace a lot of investigation companies that get too big. So if I'm taking over an account, it's because the quality of service is 9 times out of 10. If I'm taking over an account from a law firm, it's because the guy they were using beforehand is not doing the job that he used to do. And 9 times out of 10, it's because they got too big.
Yeah. Great observation, and kind of what I've been noticing lately. But then at the same time, sometimes I think, oh man, should I have stayed like this one person firm? But, the cases that, and I think there's a niche for that for sure. But the cases that I tend to be drawn to, you just need more people. You just have to have a few more hands, and so that's what's been working for me anyway.
Yeah.
That smaller team.
Yep, definitely.
So when we discussed kind of your area of specialty, and like I mentioned earlier, I haven't really had anybody on the show to talk about plaintiff personal injury cases or accident site photography. So would you kind of just explain the types of assignments that you receive on these types of cases, on the plaintiff's personal injury cases, and what do they entail? Just kind of big picture.
Well, it's funny because you would think that fraud wasn't related to any of that stuff. It really isn't, but it kind of is. So basically what we're hired to do is we're hired right at the get-go. If somebody has an accident and they call a lawyer and they tell them the facts of the accident, the lawyer will then call us and say, go meet with these people, have them sign our retainer, and then I want you to work up the case. Go to the site, investigate what happened, interview witnesses, take photos, really get me the lay of the land, find out the who, what, when, where, how, why. I want to know all that stuff. So by the time I'm negotiating with the insurance carrier, I've got leverage because we figured everything out already, right? So that is really the genesis of my business model. Get in and get out really quickly. Where the fraud comes in is, you've got people that may have faked an accident, and there's a lot of that going around in New York these days, Brooklyn, and those natures where you have these medical facilities, that are like fraudulently processing no-fault claims and things like that, right? So, meeting somebody and really sizing them up. So, like, not only are we a salesperson for the firm because we're telling the person, hey, sign this retainer, this firm is great, but we're also sizing up their story of what happened, right? And sometimes like they'll say things like, that doesn't really line up. Like I had a case I was investigating once, and the person had claimed that they had been stopped and making a left-hand turn to cross over a major road. I guess it was probably 2 lanes with a double yellow line, but it had you were allowed to make a left turn. It was like they had that turning lane in it. And I interviewed the person, and they had horrible injuries, and it looked like a really, really great case. Well, everything was great until I showed up at the auto yard to photograph the vehicle, and the speedometer was stuck at 45. So basically what happened when that impact happened, the instrument panel kind of locked in on what happened. I'm like, yeah, this person was not stopped to make a left. They were going, it was a head-on collision. They were going 45. So, like you have stuff like that. So you have these instances where you do come across fraud, even though you're not there to I guess, for on behalf of an insurance company. You're there on behalf of the person who may be taking the case, and they want to know that, hey, this is not legitimate. You don't even bother, right? Because we do get that from time to time.
Yeah. So you're investigating what happened. So fact finding, but then also, kind of gathering facts to help your client, the attorney, decide if they want to take the case.
Yeah. I mean, if they're sending us out, we're pretty much taking it, but it's more along the lines of leverage for negotiating on liability, really getting a sense of what happened. But if from time to time, like we will have to like make a phone call to the attorney going, did you know about this? Like before they have this person sign this retainer, and they're like, no, get the heck out of there.
Yeah.
It happens.
So I actually heard you talk about this on somebody else's podcast. I don't remember which one it is, which is unfortunate because I would plug it. But you mentioned kind of how you've positioned yourself where, yes, you're the investigator, but you're also kind of helping sell the attorney services to the individual involved in the accident. Is that unique to you? Is that kind of talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was John Hoda's podcast. Maybe.
Maybe. I don't know. There's so many.
So it's almost like by nature, because what happens is when somebody has an accident, they're usually not just calling one attorney. They're usually calling like 3 or 4. And, they may not be 100%. Even if they schedule that appointment with you, they're not 100%. So you got to create a comfort level when you're meeting with these people as to why they made the right decision. So a couple of things. You got to be familiar with the firm you're representing, right? So you need to go to their website, read about their big verdicts, read about, the attorneys that work there, if they're involved in any, social issues like fundraising or things like that. Like, have a personal story. Yeah, I know this attorney. We've been doing business with him for a couple of years. And, do you know that he also has a nonprofit organization that raises money for St. Jude's, like stuff like that, right? Just being able to make it more personable, creating that comfort level with somebody, and this is what I train my people to do. It's never just get in and get out. Don't get in and get the paperwork signed and get out. You want to create that comfort level and that customer service level. And I relate my own experiences of dealing with the firm. I've been working with them for, 10 years, and they pay their bills to me every month. Right. So you can see how they take care of the small vendors that they do business with, that's the type of mentality you have there. Or I had another firm that, they treat their employees really well with their 401k benefits. Like they do extra distributions and stuff like that. And I know this because I have lunch with the owner of the firm, right? So I'm not saying something that's not true. It's just something I've developed with my relationship that I can use that as a sales technique, to make me feel comfortable.
So do you think that that's what, let's just be specific. So who are your clients and what are they looking for when they're asking you to go out and do these things?
No, that's a great question. So I decided very early on that I was really going to create that boutique business and just focus in on plaintiff personal injury attorneys. It was a natural progression for me because I worked in-house for somebody.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew, the nuts and bolts of what it took to get those cases going. So I had an advantage, being able to ask the right questions during that initial interview, because I knew the answer, or I knew the questions that were coming that needed answers. So if I could ask them at the intake, it would make the attorney's job easier that way. So I made that decision very early on, plaintiff only. When I started, I worked for defense, but it was less than a year. It wasn't a right fit for me. I really think like a personal injury attorney on the plaintiff side. So it just made more sense for me.
So then why do you think they continue to hire you instead of other firms?
Yeah, another great question. So what sets my company aside from other companies is the fact that we are plaintiff only, and we do understand that aspect to it. And I am a big supporter of the New York State Trial Lawyers Association. So anybody that's an investigator should definitely, like, if you want to work with attorneys, you should definitely get involved with the local bar and show up to their events and support them. I support it financially. I pay a monthly fee to support this organization so I can get invited to the events, and it's worth every penny. I was just talking with my wife about this actually like 2 days ago, and she's like, "Oh my God, like why are you spending that money?" I'm like, "You realize I'm making like 20 times the amount of what I spend, right?"
Right.
Like, oh, okay.
Very good investment.
Yeah. So just being there, and I think they hire me because they know that this is my domain knowledge, right? This is my space, and that I know the right questions to ask. And at the end of the day, how can I help them get resolution on their matter in a efficient way, right? And because we're so knowledgeable about what they need, they continue to go back to us. And Leah, like, probably the number one reason that I get the callbacks is I answer my phone 24/7. I am accessible. I chose this life, right? I chose to make myself accessible like that. So when the phone rings at 10:30 and they've got a huge case, you got to pick that phone up. And it's that accessibility that sets you, and it's the results. And by results, I don't mean because you got them, exactly what they were looking for, but you answered the question. That's the result, right? And sometimes it's not the answer they want to hear, but it's answering the question.
So what do these cases look like, and how are you still performing these types of investigations post-COVID? Or I don't know if it's post-COVID. I think we're still in it, but you know what I mean.
I like your optimism. I'll take your
Okay.
It definitely changed things. So I am part of our state association. I'm on the board, and when COVID hit, and they had the shelter in place, which, by the way, I had no idea what that meant a year ago.
Me either.
Yeah, I'd never heard the term before. But when they came in, we said, okay, so we need to make sure that our investigators, that our security guard people in our state are essential services. And we went to our lobbyists, and our lobbyists confirmed it with the governor's office that we were indeed in essential services. So that allowed us to be out there. But then as a business owner, I got to take into consideration the safety of my employees. Do I want them out there? And there were times where I had to turn work down. Oh, I need you to go have this lady sign this release for this settlement. Great, no problem. Oh, she's got COVID.
Oh gosh.
I'm like, would you go do it? No, that's why I'm calling you. I'm like, don't ever call me again.
Yeah.
No.
Oh my gosh. No.
Yeah. So I had a couple of those. In New York State, they made it possible to do a DocuSign for notaries. So there's an executive order that's in place, and they keep extending it, actually. And it's been a blessing and a curse for us, because it has allowed us to do witness interviews online, right? It's allowed us to do intakes online. It's allowed us to notarize documents, and you have to follow the stipulations or what is in place, which is great. We're able to get work done, but it's also taken work away from us, because an attorney goes, oh, why should I hire the investigator to go and do it when I can just DocuSign, just email them, the work to do. And it's sufficient enough for them. So it's been a blessing and a curse, but definitely we had to pivot. And there were times where, even though we were essential services, we weren't out doing it. Now, when we go and we meet with people, there are precautions. All my people, they're wearing their, protective equipment. And, we try and schedule meetings outdoors when the weather's good. And one of the things I implemented, actually, is doing a majority of the initial meeting over the phone, and then schedule an appointment to basically go sign documents. So our exposure to other people is maybe 10 minutes.
Yeah. Are you doing any of those as video calls, or is it mainly phone calls?
Yeah, I mean, mostly phone calls, unless we're doing DocuSign. If we're doing DocuSign, then it does need to be documented via video. But New York is a one-party state too, so but we typically do a lot of phone work anyways. And when I say one-party state, basically what I mean is that if you're recording the conversation, only one person needs to know that the conversation is being recorded. So, like, for witness statements, we always do that regardless, because I don't know what a person's going to say. They may give me everything I need for my statement, but say I'm not going to sign anything, or say later on I never said that. I had that happen to me once, where I took a statement from somebody and they're like, I didn't say any of that stuff. It's like, okay, let's go to the tape.
Yeah.
And that's what they did. They literally played my interview. And the guy was saying, like, I never gave him a copy of the statement. And you can hear me and say, okay, I'll mail you a copy of the statement. And the guy says, no, I have a copy right here. And you literally hear the copy machine running in the audio. The guy totally perjured himself. It was fantastic.
And this was in court, like he was testifying?
He was testifying in court, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, it was hilarious.
Okay, so let's jump over into accident site photography. You mentioned it a couple of times, but how does that fit into your plaintiff work?
So very early on, I was introduced to a gentleman that basically does that for a living. He does trial photography exhibits and blow-ups, and he does trial photography. And when I was starting my business, he said, I have a lot of overflow and I need somebody to cover my extra work. I'll train you how to do what I do. And he literally took me under his wing as a mentor. And, he was able to train me on doing what, the right way, the right things to do. So it was very, very instrumental.
Yeah. So do you have any case examples of when like a good example of using this?
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about site investigations. So basically it's really, really important to send an investigator out to an accident site within the 30-day limit, right? Because there could be potentially be video that you want to be able to get access of. Light patterns are sometimes an issue. And I had a case many, many years ago. This may have been actually before I started before I actually started my business. So I was working for the attorney, and probably less than a year. And he said, I'm coming up for trial in this case, and I need you to go to this particular intersection in the Bronx. And he gave me the version of what his client said happened. And when I got there, it was completely different. So basically, there's a train trestle that breaks up the north and south traffic. And this gentleman had essentially made a turn to go up he thought he was going up the northbound lane of traffic, but he was actually going up the southbound lane of traffic. So he said he had the green light, and there was no green light for him to have because there was no traffic light where he was trying to make this turn for him. There was a traffic light for the southbound traffic, but he was making a turn to go north. So basically, he was heading the wrong way down a one-way street and had a horrific accident and major injuries. And the attorney's like, I'm going to court next week. Go take photos and videos of the intersection. And when I got out there and did the inspection, I'm like, you're going to lose your case. It's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, what you think happened didn't happen. And it had, I wasn't working for him at that time, but had he sent somebody out right away, he would have found out right away that it was, this is not a case to take. So I think he was lucky in the fact that the insurance company was offering, peanuts. They were offering about 10% of what he was looking for, and he just took the 10% and had a change of heart and, called it a day. But I've had crazy experiences with photos. There were a time that I was doing nursing home litigation, so I'd have to go to morgues and photograph remains, and that was always a challenge. You would have one shot to do it, and making sure that you get what you get. Oh, and by the way, you can't be afraid of dead people, or if you're in the ME's office, someone's going to be running a saw and pulling intestines out, and you got to be okay with that, right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was a little crazy.
Yeah. Had you experienced that before you started?
No.
Or was it like somebody asked you to do it and you've got your own business and you're like, well, I'll figure it out. I'll go down there.
Well, pretty much. I mean, I called my mentor and said, hey, I need to do this. Like, what's the right way to do it? And I remember actually probably like within the first 2 or 3 months of me opening my business, my mentor calls me and says, I need you to cover an assignment for me. I was like, okay, well, what do you need me to do? He goes, you got to go to the burn unit at Westchester Medical Center. There was a guy who was involved in an accident on a bridge. He got rear-ended by a truck. It caught on fire. He caught on fire and he jumped off the bridge and into the water, and he lived, but he's got burns over 80% of his body. So I need you to go to Westchester Medical Center to their burn unit, and I need you to photograph his dressing changes. And Leah, that was probably one of the hardest things I ever did, because this man was alive and he was in excruciating pain and he was screaming at the top of his lungs. And I had one chance to get it right, and here I am like faking it till I make it, right? Like I'm using this equipment I don't really know how to use too well. And I prayed real hard before going in there. Like, God, please, I got one chance. And it ended up working out. The guy lived actually, and I know the case is over. I don't know how much he got, but it was really something that stays with you. And there's every now and then you'll see videos of accidents, and you'll watch it and you're just like, wow, I wish I didn't see that. I've had a few of those.
Definitely something to consider if somebody's thinking, oh, accident site photography and plaintiff's work, this sounds cool. Like, definitely consider that, because
I always approach it as like a scientific way, I try and disassociate myself with it. Hear the remains of somebody or whatever, but or you go to a car, like where there's a fatality there, and it's like you look at this car and you this like, okay, this was the last few minutes of this person's life, and you're looking through and going, the car was messy, like the coffee all over the place, like here's a Shania Twain album, like they listen to Shania Twain, like that kind of stuff always like fascinates me. Who was this person, stuff you come across.
We'll be right back.
At Workman Forensics, we're your modern-day Sherlock Holmes. The team at Workman Forensics follows patterns to find money through forensic accounting and fraud investigation services. Using our data sleuth process, we build client cases telling the story of what actually happened. This process serves clients in the best way, whether they are going through a divorce, a partnership dispute, an estate and trust dispute, or a fraud investigation. So what is data sleuthing? Well, after serving clients in this best way for 10 years, we are proud of our technological improvements, making our investigations work similar to that of a manufacturing process. By following a consistent investigative and internal process, our team addresses client concerns in a timely, responsive, and thorough manner. But don't worry, clients don't go through this process alone. We believe communication is vital to the success of an engagement, so each client is guided by a highly trained and specialized expert forensic accountant along the way. And because we think data sleuthing is the best way to investigate financial disputes, we work to train other professionals as well through our investigation games, guided interactive workshops, and our Be a Data Sleuth seminars. To learn more about any of these services or trainings, visit our website, workmanforensics.com. In fact, our website is full of resources for anyone looking to learn more about forensic accounting, fraud investigation, or our data sleuth process. This includes blog posts, free Excel downloads, more podcast episodes, and links to our YouTube channel. So if you're looking to get into the investigation industry, or if you've been an investigator for years, we know you'll find something helpful in our free resources. So visit our website, workmanforensics.com.
Welcome back to my interview with Matt Spaier. So I want to circle back to a few things you just mentioned in those stories. First of all, you mentioned light patterns. What are you talking about when you say light patterns?
Yeah. So basically, you've got traffic lights that sometimes have turning arrows.
Okay.
And depending on how they're set, when does that turning arrow come? Is it before the opposite traffic comes or after they come and they're supposed to stop? What happens a lot of time is, folks say they had a green turn arrow and they really had a solid green and they're making a left-hand turn. Yes, they have a green light, but they're also supposed to yield to traffic in the opposite direction. So now there's a comparative negligence aspect to it that you have to understand. That happens a lot, actually. So, making sure that you're, recording the light sequence is definitely something above and beyond, right? You're not just going out and taking photos, because literally they could send Jim from the mailroom to go and take photos. But if Jim doesn't understand, how a car accident, the mechanics of how it works and what's important, he's not going to do the job right. And that's another reason why I get calls to do this stuff, because, I've got 25 years experience doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. So you also mentioned looking in the car, and I'm just wondering, how do you if you get called out immediately, that's a better question. Do you ever get called out immediately and the car is still at the site itself or at the scene itself? Or is it typically in an impound lot or something?
Yeah, usually it's at an impound lot at that particular time. I know there are folks that are accident reconstructionists that insurance companies, especially tractor trailer cases, they're literally on retainer for, big Mac up. I need you to come up here right away. No, by the time I'm getting involved, it's usually been towed somewhere.
Okay.
And they're doing something. But the implement of social media and using, apps that are available to find out what it looked like at the time, something like Citizen has been a game changer, right? If you have a major accident and Citizen sends out an alert and now there are people reporting on what happened, I'm watching videos and I'm seeing positions of vehicles, so it's very cool. Yeah. The technology definitely, if you know what to look for, can help you.
Yeah. I was wondering, is there anybody collecting those types of things, or are you having to I'm thinking of the, when there was black ice in Dallas just a few weeks ago, or I guess by the time this airs, it'll be a couple months ago. And there was a crazy pile up. And a bunch of people caught that on video. That was just on the news station. But is anybody collecting that information and kind of making it a database?
Well, if they were, if an investigator was retained early on, they're pulling all that stuff down, archiving it. Citizen is difficult. If you're not there quick enough, you could lose it. It definitely expires. You got to be within a few days to find it.
Okay.
And it didn't used to be that way. It used to be you could go back, a month or 2 months even and find stuff. But I'm finding they changed their platform a bit, that if you're not doing it right away, it's very difficult to get it.
Something else you mentioned is your mentor. And you may have mentioned this earlier when you were talking about photography, but how did you, just for somebody who may be looking for a mentor, how did this work out in your career?
Yeah. If you can find somebody that can teach you how to do something, definitely you want to have that relationship. And this guy wasn't an investigator. And what was nice was, because he had been in the same industry as me and would get the calls if I need some investigative work done. He'd be like, yeah, I'm not an investigator, call Matt. And he would basically just funnel them to me, and I'd have to pay my tribute. We worked out a deal, and everybody was happy, so it was good. So yeah, finding a mentor is really, really important. I would suggest, like, if you're just getting into this industry, whether you be a CFE or a private investigator or an executive protection guy or girl, if this is, your passion, what you want to do, get involved with your state associations, get involved with national associations, like NCISS or NALI, or NALI actually you have to have experience to be a part of, but NCISS is a good one. And really pick the brains of folks. So I have a site that I use called Investigators Toolbox. It's something I came up with recently, and basically it's one of those networking aspects, and it's great for new investigators. I always get excited when new investigators join because I'm giving them exposure to some of the thought leaders within our industry. Not only is it training that you're getting out of it, but you're actually these people that do the training are also members of the site too, and you can friend request them and basically pick their brain on things too.
Yeah, that's awesome. We were working a case now that I am really thankful for the mentors that I've had, and not that I've had like one, it's like just kind of for a season, somebody's helping me on something, but then maybe I've worked with somebody else on another case, or maybe even from the podcast, and reach out to them and say, hey, can I run this by you? And that's been invaluable in my career. And I know, so through the Investigators Toolbox, I'm glad you mentioned that here. I wanted to make sure we talked about that. And also the ACFE has a mentoring program. And I had a few people request this year. This was the first year they had requested. And I thought, oh gosh, I do not have time to do this. What are you talking about? But it's been really rewarding. I highly recommend that program as well. It's also been kind of nice to see whenever, from sitting in the mentor seat, when we have these calls, it's really interesting to see, or to like remember, oh yeah, I used to not know these things. And because it seems it's just my life now. And so that's been really interesting. On these types of cases, just from the like class action stuff I work, the attorneys are footing the bill, and then they're going to get paid based off of what they collect. So is that the case here? And if so, when in that process can a private investigator expect to kind of be paid, and how does that work?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question. So basically what happens in New York anyways is the fee structure is set at 33 1/3. So the way it used to
for the attorneys.
Yeah, for the attorneys. So the way it used to be structured, and they changed it probably about 4 years ago. No, it's longer than that now. I think it's probably close to 6 or 7. It used to be they would lay out the expenses for investigations, court costs, medical records, anything like that. They would recover those expenses at the end, and then the 1/3 fee would be based upon the remaining amount of money. That's the way it used to be. So when they changed it, they said you're going to recover all your expenses. So the attorney will recover everything they've laid out, investigative costs, medical records, so on and so forth. But the 1/3 fee is based on the full amount of the settlement. So if the attorney was getting $100,000, I'll just throw it out there because the math is easy. They spent 10 grand on expenses. They'll recover their 10 grand, but their 1/3 fee would be based on 100,000, not 90. Yeah. So why that's important for the investigator is it's not coming out of the attorney's pocket. So they're more willing to actually spend money to work a case up because it could get them more money. They'll get a higher value, but they're also not losing the money of the investment. It's coming out of the actual client's pocket. Now, what happens is if there's no settlement or an award, the client is not responsible for repaying that money. So if we're saying 100 and 10,000 of that is settlement, if you lose the case, that $10,000, the attorney eats it, which is why they're allowed to charge 33 1/3, because there are plenty of times they lay money out and they don't get anything from it.
Right. So then are your fees, and I don't know if this is standard or not in your area, but are your fees like hourly, fixed fee? Do you get paid up front? Do you get paid when the attorneys get paid?
Well, if I got paid when the attorneys got paid, I'd be out of business.
Most of the time
it's
I'm just setting you up, all the different possibilities.
Yeah, it's usually about 5 years from 3 to 5 years to
Yeah.
resolve a case. And we obviously don't collect interest on any of that stuff. So I have found in this industry, trying to collect interest is a waste of time.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I have a pretty standard agreement with every attorney I work with, paid in 30 days. And what I started doing about a year or two ago was start taking credit cards. And basically I would keep the card on file. And if they were comfortable paying a check, it's like, okay, you can send me a check, but at day 31, I'm banging your card if I don't have a check in hand. So I got to say, my receivables are pretty impressive. I don't really have too much that's over 30 days, and that has come over years of just having experience of building relationships. I know I'm going to get paid. And blacklisting people that that won't pay, because every now and then you do get that stuff, and it's like, okay, I'm one and done. I'm never going to work with you again.
Yeah, our receivables changed when I started accepting credit cards. Game changer.
Big
Because
game changer.
I'm not a finance company.
Yeah. And what attorneys don't realize in New York is that they can pass the administrative charge. So whatever it is that credit card fees charge you, they can pass that along to their client.
Mm-hmm.
If you're paying 3% interest or whatever, and you're billing your client at 3% for charging on credit cards, they can pass that along to their clients. So sometimes having that conversation with them makes them more agreeable to doing a credit card thing. Like, I have clients, it's great. First of the month, boom, settle the invoice out, keep it moving. That, as a small business owner, if you've got that model of 6 people or under, that's a big deal. Knowing that you're getting money on the first every month is a huge deal.
Right. And then I've had some consultants and stuff say, "Oh, I'd rather you just pay ACH, not credit card." And I don't know about you, Matt, but I just increased my fees by 3%. I mean, I would rather get paid timely and make it easy for people to pay. But that's just, my personal opinion, but just work that into my fee structure where it's not, I don't add it on where I think that's annoying. Even if I'm in a retail shop and they say, or the government, and they're like, "Well, we now have to charge you a processing fee." I'm like, just work it into the fee.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're getting it now with the COVID restoration fees. When you go out to restaurants, they're automatically charging an extra tax now. On everything.
Yeah. Just add it in.
Yeah.
We wouldn't have known.
So here's the thing, right? I agree with you on that too, but also sometimes I think, at least my experience anyway, has been to do that. So basically, what I started doing is I implemented about a year ago a $50 charge on all my invoices that covers administrative costs and report writing. Because I used to never charge for that. I always just built it to whatever. But I'm obviously paying my people to write reports. So I was like, I got to change this model. And not one of my clients complained about an extra $50 per invoice. And I got to say, man, it generated probably about $65,000 worth of extra income for the year.
Wow.
Yeah. You don't think about it. When you start doing the numbers, you're like, wow. And it's like, okay, if somebody complains about it, let's have a conversation and maybe I up my hourly.
I like fees like that. I know we normally don't talk about this on my podcast, but I don't mind fees like that where it's the same for everybody. It's when, if you pay me through ACH, it's this much. But if you pay me through check or you pay me through credit card, now you have to pay 3% more. I just think lump it in.
Confusing. You end up being Monty.
Just keep it simple because, I don't know, just as a business owner, why do I want to mess with that anyway? I have to remember if I'm going to increase it or decrease it. Just cut the administrative costs so you have time to work on more cases. That's, that's how I feel about that. All right. So before we wrap up, is there an investigation or a case that you'll never forget that you would want to share with us?
Well, I was trying to think about a scenario because I figured you'd probably ask me about a case. So I was like, all right, if Lee's going to ask me about something, what would I want to talk about? And I kept coming back to a fraud-related case that I thought was just hilarious. So there was this guy who probably had about 5 or 6 accidents or injuries. Okay, he just kept getting injured, and he kept hiring different law firms. And I happened to come across this guy probably about 3 times for different. And essentially what this guy was doing is he was borrowing money on his cases. So he would have to have surgery, and he would sign up with a law firm, and he'd create this horrible, emergency situation where his mother had died and he needed money for funeral costs, and he was borrowing money against the case. And like by the third time I look at the dude, I'm like, how many times is your mother going to die, dude? Like seriously.
Strange.
And it was one of those situations where, I called the attorney from outside. I excused myself. I said, I got to go outside for a second and call the attorney. And I called the guy. I said, listen, this guy, something's up, because this is now the third time I'm seeing him. Yeah, it's a different injury than it was last time. I think it's like an ankle, and last time was a knee, but it's the same song and dance. Like something stinks here. And you can look and see if someone's had or has cases open, and you can also look and see if there's money attached, so if they borrowed money on it, right? So the attorney did a quick search and saw that this guy had all these liens against his other cases, and he's like, yeah, we're going to keep moving on this one. So,
oh my goodness. So, okay, just to make sure I understand, so he would have some sort of injury?
Yeah, I mean, the injuries were legitimate. I don't know if the dude threw himself down the stairs or whatever, but he was tripping, and they were never well, actually, one was a car accident. I think the other three were trip and falls.
Wow. So, okay, so he'd have this injury. He hires a law firm, so he's got a lawsuit out there. And then because it's like a plaintiff's case where, they should collect some sort of money, he would then use that as collateral to borrow money for whatever.
Yeah. So there's a big business of money lending companies that will fund your money against your cases. They charge ridiculous interest rates. I mean, like like you for every $1,000 you're buying, you're probably paying $4,000 to get that money. You're $5,000.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
yeah, and then he's just taking all this money and then running. So it's very interesting.
That is. I have not run across that.
Yeah.
That's a good one. That's a good one, Matt. Thanks for sharing. Well, thank you so much for taking time to talk with me today. And if any of our listeners would like to connect with you or learn more about your work and also the Investigator's Toolbox, what is the best way to do so?
Well, I am all over social media. And if you're an investigator and you can't find me, you're a terrible investigator, because I'm literally like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. I'm all over the place. You can just search for Investigator's Toolbox. If you're not a member of that community, and it's open to more than just investigators, by the way. If you're a certified fraud examiner, you do qualify to join. It's a great networking community. You can really, really learn a lot. There's a lot of information in there, and research, OSINT research sources on there. It's www.investigators-toolbox.com. Definitely check it out.
Perfect. Well, we'll make sure to put a link to your LinkedIn profile and Investigator's Toolbox in the show notes. So thank you again.
Yeah, this was great. I love chatting with you.